Good morning, marhaba. So let me begin this session, which is a very sensitive and a very serious global phenomenon, really, by reciting a poem. The title is I'm Waiting. They say with time it gets better. 33 years and I'm still waiting. I fight, I cry, I scream. I'm waiting. I wake up afraid to open my eyes, afraid to start my day, afraid who or what will trigger it, afraid every minute. I'm waiting. I'm afraid to walk out the door, afraid of who's out there, afraid of what will happen, afraid that I can't escape. I'm waiting. I'm afraid to close my eyes, afraid of what I will see, hear, afraid of what I will dream, afraid of screaming, afraid I won't wake up in time. I'm waiting. I'm afraid to start a new day. I'm waiting. You know, when we think about gender inequality, rather, we often think of the workplace, of labor force participation, of the lack of women in leadership, on board positions, and of the gender pay gap. But this is not the entire picture. When talking about equality or inequality, we should also be talking about violence, or more specifically, violence against women. Let me give you some figures. According to McKinsey, 1 of every 2 US women have been a victim of sexual violence, while 1 in every 3 has experienced violence from an intimate partner. The latter number is consistent with the average in no less than 95 countries. Aside from its emotional toll on women, violence is taking an enormous financial toll, on which we are going to discuss today. So in total, the figures are: violence against women in the States costs about $5.8 billion in direct costs, including medical costs, which amount to 70%, lost productivity, and lost earnings over women's lifetimes. In India, women can lose an average of at least 5 paid workdays for each incident of intimate partner violence. And this means that affected women would get 25% less of their salary each time an incident of violence happens. In Uganda, about 9% of violent incidents forced women to lose time from paid work, amounting to approximately 11 days a year, equivalent to half a month's salary, affecting not only the victim, but also the family. Canada, annual costs of intimate partner violence were calculated at $1.16 billion. Australia, $11.38 billion. England and Wales, make a wild guess, $32 billion. Now, this conversation today aims at raising awareness on the domestic, public, and workplace violence against women and against girls. And we're going to discuss with our experts today, but I would like to invite your participation, your questions and comments, because what you have to say is going to be very important. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Sarah Brun, Special Director to the Executive Director of UN Women, based in Cairo. Welcome.
Thank you.
Afaf Al-Mari, Head of Social Services Department here in Sharjah. also the co-author of the publication, The Role of Gender and Organizational Support in Work, Family Conflict for Accountants in the UAE. Welcome. Mavic Cabrera Balleza, the CEO and International Coordinator of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. You're also part of an international team that provides support to the discussions on a general recommendation on women and armed conflict under the UN Convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Welcome, Mavic.
Thank you.
Dr. Danish Mustafa, Department of Geography at King's College. Your research interests lie at the intersection of environmental hazards, water resources, and development geography. But you have some very interesting contributions to make on this panel today. Last but not least, Reem Aslan, Senior Consultant for Equality with the International Labour Organization, but you're also co-founder of the Sadaka campaign in Jordan, and you have a vast experience in women's economic empowerment. So we heard your titles. What I would like to know from each one of you is the story behind this title and what you do under this title. So very briefly, the mic over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I think this panel is incredibly important because it sheds light on an issue that we all are aware about and that affects us all. I mean, we heard some of the statistics. 1 in 3 women globally in their lifetime will experience violence. I started my career actually working in a shelter for women who had been abused and had experienced violence in Canada, where we heard that the cost of violence against women is incredibly high, amounting to billions of dollars every year. It is difficult to justify talking about the cost of violence when violence is something that is so deeply personal, something that affects women on a level that many of us cannot comprehend, and something that affects the families and the communities in which these women and girls live. But when I was working in the shelter, I also realized the importance of understanding the cost of violence on the society as a whole. One of the women I was working with was my age. She was in her mid-20s at the time, had a career, had a college education, very similar to me. And at a young age experienced very, very severe violence from her partner. She quit her job. Her self-esteem was at the bottom. She felt she had nowhere to turn, nowhere to go. And as a result of that, lost everything she had worked for. Where she is today, I unfortunately don't know. I wish I did. I hope she's in a much better, more empowered space. But the importance of recognizing the individual stories when we do something as impersonal as quantifying violence is incredibly important, because we can quantify the cost on healthcare, on education, on loss of productivity, but we can't quantify the intangible, the personal pain, the pain of children who witness violence happening towards their mothers growing up, how this affects children, boys and girls, in their own personal life later on as they become adults. So in costing the violence, we have to take into consideration the quantifying, the numbers, the figures that you mentioned, but also the personal experiences. And that, for me, is incredibly important. And that is also what I do with UN Women and what UN Women does as a whole, working on policy, but also working on service delivery and working with survivors of violence to provide a space for voice and empowerment.
Thank you, Sarah.
السلام عليكم. أنا اسمي عفاف المري. أشتغل في دائرة الخدمات الاجتماعية. أسسنا في إمارة الشارجة مركز لحماية المرأة، وهذا المركز معني بإيواء النساء المحتاجات للإيواء. المركز هو أحد المؤسسات التابعة للدائرة، وتختلف أسباب الإيواء المرأة في المركز، ولكن اللي يعني يخلينا نشوف إن المركز هذا اللي يعمل تحت الدائرة هو ما ماخذ كامل الصورة، بمعنى يحتاج المركز إلى يعني تتدخل بوضع بعض الآليات لتقديم الدعم الكامل للمرأة وحمايتها، وليس الإيواء كجزء من الحل المشكلة. العنف ضد المرأة في المجتمع يلاحظ كأنه هو أحد معوقات تمكينها الاقتصادي. إذا هي المرأة راح توصل بالتمكين الاقتصادي أن هي تصل إلى مصادر التمويل، أن هي تقدر تفتح حسابات، أن هي تقدر تساهم في المجتمع بالعمل والإنتاج، إذا هي تعرضت للعنف في أماكن العمل أو تعرضت للعنف المنزلي، هذا العنف راح يمنعها من أن هي تساهم في المجتمع وفي تنميته وفي أن هي تكون قوة شرائية داعمة لاقتصاد البلد. يمكن نأتي في خلال هذا السيشن على الأسباب والعوائق وهي الحلول والمقترحات وأي مبادرات أخرى ممكن يتم تبنيها كحلول لإيقاف ومكافحة العنف ومناهضة العنف ضد المرأة. شكرا.
Dr. No, not Dr. Danish yet, but Mavic, what is your experience when it comes to data, and also whether we are really seeing and coming, if you like, across the real picture when we read numbers, when we read data?
Thank you for those questions. First, to begin with, we already have a lot of data on violence against women. You cited some very staggering data, and yesterday, nearly all of the panels spoke about that too. Some of those are that globally, an estimated 200 million women and girls have undergone female genital mutilation, for example, which is also a form of violence against women and girls, and that globally, violence against women, particularly femicide, represent 47% of the crimes committed, again, by intimate partner or family members. So there's no shortage in data. What we lack is political will, particularly from governments. We lack effective implementation of laws and policies to end impunity on violence against women and to support victims and survivors. The good thing is there are a number of good practices, but these are still seen as exceptional best practices rather than the standard practice. But I wouldn't discount the importance of data collection on violence against women, because these serve as evidence for victims and survivors to find justice, and they are the basis for effective interventions. And besides, when you put a number to an issue, it's an effective way of drawing attention to it. But the bottom line is that there's no shortage of data. There is a shortage of implementation of laws and policies that would not only effectively support victims and survivors, but prevent the occurrence of violence against women. The other question has to do with economic dimension and human rights.
Not yet. We will visit that later.
All right.
Let's do a brief introduction by everyone. Dr. Danish.
Okay. I'm an academic, and I was always fascinated by the insight that you're born male or female. It's a biological reality, can't do anything about it. But then the society makes you into a man and a woman. And I was also fascinated by the sort of performative aspect of how we humans kind of perpetually create ourselves. practically everyone over here this morning spent some time enacting their masculinities and femininities and packaging themselves into a particular role of an acceptable man, woman, lady, boy, lad, whatever it is you want to call. And the reason I'm here is that I did this work on, it was a 3-year-long project, on how masculinities and femininities are perpetually enacted in urban spaces in Pakistan. The report is right here. If anyone wants it and promises me to read it, I'll be happy to give you a copy of it. So I thought there was going to be a couple of slides I wanted to show. I don't know when
Are
they
we
will
ready
come up.
for these
Okay.
slides? Can we have them on screen, please?
Okay. So that's the reason I'm here. And I just want to share, how do I change? Could I get the next one, please?
The
Can
green,
we
I think.
switch to the
I
next
pressed
slide?
the green button. Nothing's happening.
It's not working?
Nothing happens. Doesn't matter. If it changes, if someone can change the slide, that would be great. If not, then we're just going to
I'm sure they're on it, yeah.
be stuck with that.
Okay.
So, in case of Pakistan, we did some work. We did about 2,500 questionnaires. We did for participatory photography, which I was hoping to show just now. I don't know if I'll be able to show it, maybe not.
Any chance that we can manage to change to the next slide because it will help our conversation?
Could we please have the next slide? Okay, doesn't matter.
Is it this one?
No, it wasn't this one.
Okay.
I have no idea what that is. Okay, there we go. That was the one which just disappeared.
Okay.
Could we get that, please?
So the previous slide is the one we would like to
this
have
is the
on
one.
screen.
This is the
Thank
one.
you.
Okay, so this is a photograph that was taken by a doting father of his daughter. And I thought it was a very indicative kind of a slide of how femininity is supposed to be enacted. This is a little girl who's playing a bride, and the father took a photograph of it. I can say many, many things about it, but I'm not going to. I'll let you guys absorb that. Could I get the next slide, please?
It's shocking, really.
Okay, no, sorry. All right, here we go. This is a slide taken by the cousin of this gentleman in Rawalpindi, and her caption was how masculinity is kind of created, and the body language and everything that you're seeing over here of how a man comes to be in that society. And the question really is that violence, yesterday we were having dinner, at the dinner table it came up gender fluid. And I said that gender, and I was saying to my friends, table mates, that sex is static, it's biologically static. But gender is a social construct, and society is temporally and geographically inflected, invariably. So gender being a social construct has to be fluid. It is the society that puts containers around it and says that at this time in 2016, this is what a Pakistani man would look like. This is how Pakistani masculinity will be celebrated. The question of violence is not separate from the question of how we create ourselves. The question of what is terrifying is desired, and the question of desire comes deeply imbricated in it. There are material reasons for it, and then there are ideological reasons for it, discursive reasons for it, which I'll be happy to talk about as questions and answers come about.
Thank you. And Reem, so please explain a bit more about the title and the work that you do with ILO, but also if you'd like to talk to us a bit about Sadaqa.
Sadaqa, yeah.
Sadaqa.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. I work for the ILO as a profession, but I'd like to introduce myself as a women labor rights activist. We're a group of women in Jordan that identified the challenges that face Jordan, which are not unique. Pay equity, flexible work arrangements, having access to daycare facilities when you have children, and other issues as well. So we created 2 campaigns, and I'm glad that I was part of these 2 campaigns. I'm a co-founder of them. One is called Sadaqa, a daycare in my workplace, في مؤسستي حضانة. And the other campaign is called Stand Up with the Teachers campaign for fair wages. قم مع المعلم وفه الأجورة. وهذه التسمية, this title came from the teachers themselves. Sorry, sometimes when I switch from a language to another, it takes me a while. So initially, when I started working with the ILO for 2 or 3 years, we were doing a number of studies, and we were providing numbers to the government so they will take action. With the pay equity, we found out that the private education sector, there is a huge gap in pay. It can reach up to 43%, which means if a man earns $100, a woman will earn $57. So we thought, okay, we told the government that, and of course, and legislators, and they thought, these are, cases here and there, you're not serious about it, we're not gonna take it seriously until we really know the story. So we did an in-depth study in Jordan, and that even did not fly. So at the end, we thought of using a methodology with Sadaqa and this campaign, the Stand Up with Teachers campaign. It's called Community Organizing Methodology that was developed in Harvard, where you form a core team with the people that are affected, and then they form smaller teams in different areas. So with the Stand Up with Teachers campaign, we found out that there isn't only a wage gap, they are not even receiving their minimum wage. Now, when Nariman from a governorate in Irbid talks to the Minister of Education about that, and to the Minister of Labor, it's different than when Reem represents these teachers in those meetings. So we empowered a group of teachers in Jordan. We started in one governorate, and then we moved to 2 others. And now they are talking to politicians on their issues. And recently, in September, they created a campaign. They called it Our Salary in the Bank Account and Not Under the Table. And to be honest, we were inspired with the transfer of wages from the Emirates, because it's an action that your government took a while ago. And we are trying to push the government of Jordan to start transferring the teachers' salaries through a bank account. And I can tell you the story maybe a bit later. Mm-hmm. With Sadaqa, we have, as you have here in the Emirates, in many countries in the world, that the employer should be providing access to a daycare facility if they are employing X number of women. But the government of Jordan was not enforcing that. So with Sadaqa, we worked with the government of Jordan, with the Ministry of Labor in particular, and with the inspection department, where they started inspecting on companies that are not providing the daycare. And we found out that there are 900 companies in Jordan that this article applies to. Today, we are proud to say that 10% of them have a daycare facility because of the work of Sadaqa. But the others, we found out when we did some listening sessions with them that they are facing challenges. For example, the bank sector, if they want to provide a daycare facility in the workplace, they have to get certain permissions from the central bank for security reasons. So we came up with other models where a group of banks can create a daycare facility in the same geographic area where women can walk to that nursery or daycare facility so they can breastfeed their child or they can check on their child during working hours with, of course, the system that they have in the workplace. There are other ways that we also looked at as models where you can subcontract a third party to provide a daycare facility if the situation does not help. For example, take the hospitals. They cannot also provide a daycare facility in their workplace for health reasons. Pharmaceutical factories, the same thing. With the garment factories, we found out because of commuting time, it's hard for women to take their children to the garment factories in Jordan. So we asked the employers that they can also provide them with a voucher. But we're still facing challenges in amending the labor law in Jordan, this article in particular, because there's still, what we still have in the Arab world, not just in Jordan, where it states if you are employing X number of women, as if we are instilling again in the mentality of people that the responsibility of the children is a responsibility of the mother and not both parents. So that's in brief about Sadaqa, and we can talk more about it.
Thank you, Reem. So now that we've heard from each and every one of you, and we will continue this conversation, allow me to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Elizabeth Filippouli. I'm the CEO and founder of Global Thinkers Forum. We are an organization that focuses on 3 areas: accountability and leadership, so creating and developing leaders who are focused on ethical and values-based decision-making, Our second mandate, and a very important one, is women's empowerment. And the third one is youth development. For the last two, which are, if you like, the pillars of our mission, women's empowerment and youth development, we have two mentoring programs. Athena, for women, and Telemachus, for young people. I am here thanks to a very good friend of mine and one of the key supporters of Global Thinkers Forum, the late Amira bin Karam. And it is thanks to her that this gathering, this summit, is taking place here in Sharjah. And we have the privilege to partner with Nama and launch the mentoring program for women in 2018. So I would like to invite you, ladies who would like to become either mentors or mentees, to come and see me, and so that we can include you in the program. Now, one of the main reasons that we launched the program is because a key barrier for women is fear and lack of confidence for all of us. No matter how successful or less successful, or in the beginning of our career, or at the conclusion of a career, all of us suffer from a level of lack of confidence. Fear in some parts of the world, in some societies, is even more prevalent. And what we need to do is to mentor women and to help them get relieved of this major barrier of fear. So getting back to you, Sarah, you're bringing some statistics from Egypt. As we've said before, and as you so rightly said before, this is not about numbers. It is about individual names. It is about personal stories. How can we help women through mentoring support? And also, is the issue of fear a major one? What is your experience?
No, absolutely. I think fear manifests itself in many different ways. Be that in harassment on the street. So there's a fear of leaving the house and taking public transportation to go to work, for example, is a hindrance for women wanting to seek employment outside of the home. Fear of repercussions for not being able to do what one believes is gendered wifely duties, for lack of a better word, be that having dinner on the table at the right time, at the right place, taking care of the children as the primary caretaker. Fear of repercussions for failing as a woman, the way we define women in many of the countries in which we work, is another barrier, absolutely. Fear of harassment in the workplace. The statistics of women being harassed in the workplace are also incredibly staggering, not only in this part of the world, but also in Canada, also in Norway, also elsewhere. In countries where you have a quota for women in boards, you still have harassment. I mean, we see that now with the Me Too campaign. You have incredibly powerful women coming forward saying that they've been harassed in their career. Women who felt they did not have that voice or that space to raise their voice before. So that is another element of fear, absolutely, that comes in. In the work that we do as UN Women, as I said, we do work also on service delivery and response. But quite frankly, response is putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It alleviates a little bit of pain and suffering right then and there in that particular moment for that particular individual. But as Mavic said, it doesn't discuss the prevention issue as a whole. How can we prevent this from recurring? Statistics also show that women who've experienced violence once are very likely to experience it again. There is a cycle of violence that we are unable to break, be that in Egypt, be that in Canada, be that in my own country, Norway. Women who have experienced violence are beaten down physically, mentally, and emotionally in ways that makes it very difficult to escape that cycle. So beyond response, we need to look at prevention. And prevention does come, yes, in the forms of laws and policies, many of which are incredibly well thought out. Tunisia this year, for example, passed the most comprehensive legislation on violence against women in the Arab region. It covers everything from violence in the public space to harassment to partner violence, intimate partner violence, which is groundbreaking. But unless we're able to translate this into action, unless we're able to take this and put it in the homes and the bedrooms of people, so that this becomes something that we all live and breathe, and unless we're able to do that with a discussion on gender and masculinity, on what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, and what our roles are as equal partners in the family, we will not be able to break that with the laws and policies. And so that is where our work comes in, from the community, from the ground up. So conversations with women, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, conversations with men. We just released a study this year looking at masculinities and masculine identity in 4 countries in the region: Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine, and Morocco, to find out how men see their role, but also, interestingly enough, their own fears in terms of not being able to be man enough, in terms of not being able to provide, and thus manifesting this in violence vis-a-vis their partners or their sisters or what have you. So those are elements that we all need to come together in a comprehensive response to work on the prevention aspect of violence.
Thank you, Sarah. Afaf, what is your view? What are your thoughts around this cycle of violence that it is difficult to break? How can we break it or start disrupting it?
بناء على ما تقدم به إخواني وأخواتي المتحدثين، العنف اللي واقع على المرأة بأنواعه المختلفة، عنف اقتصادي، عنف جسدي، جنسي، الإهمال أو التقصير أو الاستغلال، بدأ يظهر نوع اللي هو الابتزاز الإلكتروني، وبدأ يتزايد في المنطقة مؤخراً، حيث أن تم تسجيل 30,000 حالة ابتزاز إلكتروني على مستوى دول الخليج، ويستهدف البنات والسيدات، والخوف من الفضيحة تبدأ البنت أن هي يعني تستجيب للمسيء لها إلكترونياً، بطرح مبادرات وأفكار وحلول يعني لإيقاف العنف بالقضاء على أسبابه. من ضمن الأسباب اللي تخلي العنف يقع على المرأة طبعاً كثيرة هي الأسباب، منها الفقر أو انتشار الفقر في المجتمع. فإذا تم طرح مبادرات تكافل اجتماعي ترفع من مستوى الفقراء، بالتالي يتم تقليل العنف على المرأة. كذلك توفير فرص عمالة أفضل، دعم المرأة العاملة بوجود الحضانات مثل ما قالت الأخت ريم، أن يكون في حضانات في مقر العمل للمرأة العاملة، بحيث أن تقدر أن هي تكون قريبة من أطفالها، باختلاف أنواع الحضانات. مو بالضرورة تكون حضانات ذات معايير صعبة التنفيذ، ممكن تكون عبارة عن علاقة مشتركة بين القطاع الخاص والقطاع العام وبين المؤسسات المجتمع في توفير هذه الخدمات للمرأة العاملة. كذلك مثل ما قال الدكتور دانش، المعتقدات والثقافات اللي تنتشر في المجتمع والتي قد تكون خطأ في تربية وتنشئة الجيل بالمرأة كونها أنثى والرجل، يبدأ يعني في حتى يعني ممكن يبنى عليها حملات توعية لمناصرة المرأة، ولا يكون الرجل خجولاً أنه يكون مناصراً للمرأة إذا انضم لهذه الحملات. يعني أيضاً من الأسباب احتواء المرضى النفسيين أو المدمنين للمخدرات أو المسكرات، إذا تم طرح مجموعة مبادرات باحتواء هذه الأسر، لأن باحتواء هذه الأسر يتم تقليل العنف على المرأة، وبالتالي تقدر أن هي تساهم وتتمكن اقتصادياً. فهي الأساس بطرح مبادرات بالقضاء على أسباب العنف الواقع على المرأة. عندنا في مجتمع الإمارات 70% الرقم، هي طبعا الأرقام احنا عندنا مشكلة في الداتا في الإمارات، يعني قد ما تكون مشكلة موجودة في كندا أو في أمريكا، ولكنها هنا هي مشكلة لعدم وجود مرصد اجتماعي أو مركز لأبحاث اجتماعية حقيقية علمية يتم فيها رصد الظواهر والمشكلات الخاصة بالاعتداء الجنسي. الآن المرأة إذا تتعرض إلى عنف الشريك الحميم أو اعتداء جنسي، خلينا نقول من شريك حياتها أو من زوجها، هي وين بتروح؟ بتروح مؤسسات الرعاية الصحية عشان تتعالج. علاجها هذا مكلف، ممكن تخضع لعمليات، ممكن يعني إذا كان هو اعتداء جنسي أو جسدي. هذه التكاليف الاقتصادية للعنف راح تقل في حالة توعية المجتمع، في حالة رصدها، في حالة كيف احنا بيتم يعني بناء قرارات وتشريعات تبنى، وليس تشريع فقط مثل ما قالت زميلتي أن التشريع قد يكون موجود ولكن تطبيقه فيه مشكلة، لأن التحرش الجنسي والاعتداء الجنسي على المرأة لا يمكن إثباته، لأنه هو راح يعني يتم في الخفاء، راح يتم في الظلام، فلا يمكن للمرأة أن تثبته، وتحتاج إلى شجاعة كبيرة منها أن هي تتحدث وتقول أن هي تعرضت لهذا الاعتداء أو الإساءة، وخاصة في أماكن العمل. في دراسة بيّنت أن العنف العاطفي واللفظي تجاه المرأة هو الأكبر في المجتمع، خاصة أن هاي الأشياء ممكن تكون عبر استبيانات. يعني في شرطة دبي أيضاً قالوا أن 95% من جرائم العنف ضد المرأة لا يتم الإبلاغ عنها، وأن ما يصل فقط إلى المجتمع أو إلى مؤسسات المجتمع هي 5% فقط. بالنسبة لنيابة الأسرة في أبو ظبي أيضاً بيّنت تزايد العدد، كان 679 قضية وارتفع إلى 840 قضية في السنة التالية لها في عام 2014. كذلك في رأس الخيمة سجلوا 120 قضية عنف أسري، كلها هذه القضايا والعنف ما نقصد فيه العنف الجنسي فقط، وإنما كل أنواع العنف الجسدي والنفسي والعاطفي والاستغلال. كذلك إذا تكلمنا عن موضوع التقصير والإهمال في النفقة على المرأة، وخاصة إذا قررت الانفصال عن زوجها، لأن احنا عندنا في موضوع الطلاق في الدول الإسلامية يختلف، يظل الإنفاق ملزم فيه الرجل بالإنفاق على الأبناء وهم في حضانة الأم، يصبح في تقصير من الزوج ويعتمد تحديد النفقة وكيف تحديدها. فإذا كان في إجراءات واضحة لدى يعني متخذي القرار بأن في حالة الطلاق يتم منح النفقة الإلزامية، لو كان يعني تشريعات داعمة للمرأة فبيكون في نفقة إلزامية ضرورية بمجرد الدخول في إجراءات الطلاق، على طول هي ضامنة حق أولادها طالما هي حاضنة للأطفال.
Thank you, Afaf. I would like, in the final round of questions, to discuss a bit the issue of private-public sector partnerships. And perhaps if you can think of any examples of such partnerships that have created projects either for prevention, as Sarah was saying before, or for solutions. But that would be in my final round of questions. Thank you. So Mavic, going back to your experience and your work, yes, the question of human rights, and also, if you like, unfortunately, the issue of human rights is interpreted differently across various societies, cultures, and countries, and even legal systems. So what is your experience and your thoughts about that?
Our work focuses on issues of women's rights, gender equality, and peace and security, and particularly calling on governments to ensure that women, including young women and girls, are equal participants in decision-making on peace and security issues. But we cannot expect women and girls to fully and meaningfully participate in decision-making if they are not financially independent or they are not economically empowered. When women and girls do not have that kind of empowerment, they are seen as second-class citizens in their own countries, in their own societies, and that's why a lot of women cannot get out of violent relationship because they are dependent on their partners. But now, shifting to the issue of economic dimension and human rights aspect of violence against women, we're often asked that when you only talk about the economic aspects of it, you are taking away the human rights aspect. And I say no, it doesn't. Because economic deprivation or lack of economic opportunities leads to poverty. And poverty in and of itself is a form of human rights violation. It's an attack to human dignity. And the other interesting point about this is that when poverty affects women in a much bigger way than men. Institutionally, we lack access to economic resources. Banks and other financing institutions, whether they are aware of it or not, are biased against women. The requirements for women are always more stringent than they are of men. So when you take away that opportunity for women to be economically independent, you're also taking away you're denying them the right to health, the right to adequate housing, foods, and safe water, and right to education. We have a lot of work in local communities directly affected by conflict, and when we ask them, as a country that is affected by war or emerging out of war, what is the primary issue for you? And often they would say, well, access to education, participation in peace negotiation, but on the top three always is economic opportunities, employment, jobs, livelihood. In fact, in Timor-Leste, when we were talking to women, they were giving us all of these terms, and they said, if we can say it in 100 different ways, we will do that to emphasize how important economic opportunities are. And to them, it's not just a matter of being able to put food on the table or have spending money in their pockets, but it's equated to their own personal security. So being economically independent takes it takes personal security several notches up. It guarantees, certain form of security. They are looked at differently in their own families and in their own communities. So again, going back to that point is talking about, when we talk about violence against women, are we taking away, when we look at it from an economic perspective, are we taking away the human rights dimension? Certainly not. There is a very, very strong nexus between human rights and economic empowerment. And just, if I may just reinforce your point about young people, we are actually working with young women in Indonesia now in communities that are at risk of violent extremism. When we were talking to the families and communities, what is the root cause of radicalization and violent extremism? They said, economic opportunities. So we're now working with support of Nama Foundation. We are working with young women in Indonesia about young women's leadership. But we cannot talk about leadership if we do not talk about helping them to be financially literate and financially independent. Only when all of the efforts on leadership training is coupled with that they will truly become, they will truly realize their potentials to be leaders.
I hear you, and I think you have a very strong argument there. Of course, Mavic, when we talk about economic empowerment, it means that we need to overcome two very significant barriers. A, financial, and very often digital illiteracy, and number two, the cultural barrier. So there are women, of course, who have the academic degrees or the literacy to do things or know how to access opportunities, but they are not allowed by their family environment, their husband or brother or father to do that. Thank you. Dr. Danish, back to you, and you touched on this very sensitive issue of identity. And I wonder if the case, or unfortunately hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cases like the one you talked about today, do not relate to deeply rooted cultural norms, which are extremely difficult to break and to change, very often because there are societies and there are people who will feel that they do not exist if they do not behave or act according to the way their immediate environment behaves. How do you break that?
You see, I would strongly caution you against essentializing culture in the first instance. In my department, 70% of the PhD students are women, and only 5% of the staff are women. Overall, in the discipline of geography, about 65% of the PhD students are in fact women. And eventually, in tenure-track kinds of academic jobs, about 10 to 15% are women. So, I mean, the story is not particular to a particular culture in the first instance. The second thing is that it's about the stories we tell about ourselves, to ourselves, and to the rest of the world. There's a plot line to the stories that we tell about ourselves. What is this world that we have created? What is this economic system that we have created? This economic system is predicated upon a certain masculine experience of the world, right? There's a whole history of a gendered experience, of a feminine experience of history that is absolutely not told, right? The system that you're talking about, the system of free market, if you want to call it, the economic opportunity that you want to call it, is fundamentally in its genus biased against the feminine experience. Why? Because there's a biological reproductive role. Ask anyone, any young woman in the global north, or even over here, once you join the financial industry, you're working 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week, right? After that, in terms of finding a husband, in terms of having a marriage, in terms of higher education rhythms, all of those are in fact biased against women's reproductive cycle, if you will. There's a whole sort of a set of things that I don't need to elaborate over here. Then the other issue that I think that most people tend to forget amongst the storylines is that typically we don't look into our own history and culture, different cultures. I often tell my students that with all the imagination, with all the difference, the best thing that you can imagine is the West. Is this all? Is this it? That's the extent of what you want to be? So I'm reminded of the Navajo Indians. In their culture, they used to say that there is a male with a male soul. They recognized 4 genders. Male with a male soul, female with a female soul, female with a male soul, and a male with a female soul. If you really sort of think about it, but however, under modernity, we only recognize 2, right? So if you recognize 2, one has to be the opposite of the other. It has to be. Because I have to contrast myself in relation to you. If you're emotional, I must not be. If you're nurturing, I must not be, right? If you create that binary culturally, then inevitably you're going to end up having the kind of situation that we are having. And this is not essential to culture, at least in my Pakistani culture where I come from in South Asia. We never had that until relatively recently, under different influences. So the argument I'm trying to make is that what you really need, no number of projects in the world, economic opportunity is not separate from the social, discursive construction of who we are, right? So you have to create yourself differently. What you need is foundational political cultural change, which is not to suggest that what you're suggesting in terms of shelters, training, economic opportunity should not happen. They're absolutely essential. I agree with you. But I think in looking for all of that, don't lose sight of what the deeper fundamental sort of trends are, which are simultaneously cultural, which are simultaneously historical, and we need to be focused on those.
Thank you. Rim, to get back to Jordan, Some of the projects that you have been working on very actively have to do with maternity protection,
Yes.
correct? And also daycare facilities.
Yeah.
Would you like to share more a bit?
Yeah, in Jordan, basically, many employers found hiring women is a burden on them. So one of the solutions is to establish a maternity fund with the Social Security Corporation. When women take a maternity leave, then their salaries are covered by the maternity fund, which is managed by the Social Security. But that, of course, somebody had to pay for that. So the employers, they increased the contribution of the employers and the employees to that, to the Social Security cost, the monthly cost that they pay. The other issue is basically the daycare facilities.
Very often, access is not allowed to daycare facilities, correct?
There is no access. The problem is limited access to daycare facilities, especially for working women. If they have access to the daycare facility, it's usually very, very expensive, especially with the second child. Usually women in Jordan, their economic participation increases up to the age of 32. And at the age of 32, that's when they have their second child. With the first child, usually they can manage. They either send the child to their mother or to their mother-in-law, or they found a friend, a neighbor to take care of the first child. When they have the second child, it becomes more complicated. So, and without having access to daycare facilities, that means it's more feasible for her to leave her workplace. That's why we see a huge drop when they have their second child. That's why we started working with government, initially with the government, and we made mistakes because we were enforcing the article in the labor law that I mentioned to you. We were asking them to establish a daycare facility at their cost. Now, yes, banks, they were able to do it. Some hospitals were able to do it. The easiest sector was the schools. Why schools? Because they already have the infrastructure and it's their line of business. They didn't feel that there is a major reliability issue. So we came up with other models. As I mentioned, one is basically to share the daycare facility with other companies or to have a voucher and so on. But we came up with these models because we started to have listening sessions with the employers. So when we heard them, we found out that we made a huge mistake. We were sending inspectors and making them find the companies so they can establish a daycare. But then when we started talking to them, we thought, okay, wait, this is not what we want. We don't want companies to backfire on us where they stop hiring women because they have to have 20 women or more. Although we were targeting initially the companies that are hiring 100 women or more in Jordan. So this will not happen. So we were careful in that aspect. But we made a mistake the first maybe 18 months where we didn't engage the employers. So we engaged the employers, we engaged the government of Jordan, we engaged, civil society groups. Sadaqa is registered as a civil society group. But we also engaged the legislators. So with the legislators, we had issues. Initially, they were saying you are adding, a burden on the employers, but we had to show them the dollar sign. We had to show them the dollar sign on the profitability that it can improve for the companies. And with the telecommunication companies, we did a study in Jordan, and we found out that the value in 2 telecommunication companies of a daycare facility was $1 million a year. And we have the study, it's available on the ILO website and Sadaqa website. The other thing that we had to do, and we asked the ILO to do it, and we were happy that they responded really fast to that, which is something that was mentioned yesterday. If women do not work at the same rate as men in Jordan and in the same sector, so there should be a different distribution, we are losing 8 billion a year. Now, this language, companies and legislators understand. Now, in Europe, and I was in a conference last month in Germany, and they were saying we don't need business cases, and we don't need it anymore. In the Arab world, in Jordan in particular, we still need the business case for the employers and for the legislators, so we can push for this. But nurturing partnerships,
yes,
for real change is really draining. We have a group of women activists, and I can name with a heartbeat maybe 100 names right now, men and women that are supporting this. And even if we have, structures, and we have the National Committee for Pay Equity that looks at all issues related to women economic empowerment in Jordan. We have the Ministry of Labor that heads it, and the Jordanian National Committee for Women in Jordan. And we have different representatives in that committee, including Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Industry, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, if we have a case from a teacher who is not enrolled in Social Security for one reason or another, or her salary is cut during summer break, or she doesn't have access to daycare facility, we contact specific person in each organization. So if it's a Social Security issue, I know that I can contact Ali. If it's something with the Ministry of Labor, I can contact Muhammad. And we know, and it's not the official representatives in the committee. So we always try to raise friends, believers in the cause, rather than just depending on the structure. Definitely the structure helps, because that person, when he helps us, we tell them, your organization is part of our committee.
But again, to resonate with their hearts. It has to also resonate with their conscience. And it's too heavy a chariot, if you like, for one horse to be able to pull it. It needs collaboration between the private sector, the public sector, and civil society.
Definitely.
So we only have 5 minutes left. If there are any questions or comments or observations from you, I would like to give the opportunity now, because it will be important to hear what you have to say.
May I request real quick if we could put on the last slide?
Slide. Yes.
Don't see it.
You're in the final round, perhaps?
The final slide, I just want it up there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, of course, we'll do. So please, the mic. Dr. Afia Gubash.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I know this is an international conference, but would like to add something from my own local experience. Although all my training were abroad in London, well, in this society, violence is not really a phenomenon, especially 30 years ago. You hardly hear any physical violence, but there is some type of violence which related to culture, like when a woman will not have an approval on the marriage. That's some type of violence we experience here. But gradually, and also at that time, no woman will go to the court, whatever the situation, even divorce. With all the protection of her dignity, she will be treated on that way to receive divorce, if that happens. But unfortunately, with the globalization, when we open our society and our culture to the outside world, we've been affected. In what way? For example, now the divorce must happen in the court. And to justify the reason for divorce, they will go into the details of their intimate relationship in very abusive way for the woman. Unfortunately, this is not part of our culture, but it happened. In my opinion, as a psychiatrist and somebody who takes care of education for such a long time, education is the important aspect related to the respect of women or to respect of a human being. I remember a very interesting story to tell you here. A friend of mine from a good family, educated to get a PhD degree in political science. And one day, she don't appear on TV, but she was asked to appear in a specific program where the other guest with her is the political consultant for the President Mubarak. So for her and for her family, it was something, it's good to contribute. When her young brother came to the house, saw his sister on the TV, he pulled the wire and crashed the TV and become angry with everybody. How come that his sister appeared on TV? Now, this is type of violence also.
Of course.
It's maybe intellectual violence. But that was related to, not to his culture, because all the family, the parents were approved, but because he was not educated enough to accept.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's what I want to just
Thank you for this contribution, but of course it is a form of violence and it is a form of trauma that is being created. Any comments, any responses to this?
إذا تسمحي لي.
Yes.
دكتورة شكرا على المساهمة. فعلا مع العولمة أصبح ضروري أن المرأة تدخل إلى المحاكم وتتكلم وتقول تفاصيلها وهي مو مجبرة أصلا. احنا عندنا المشاكل المتعلقة بالطلاق وايد مرتفعة وفيها وراها إساءة، وهذه الإساءة تأثر عليها وعلى تمكينها. الآن تنشئة جيل في المجتمع على أنه أنت رجل ويحق لك كل شيء وأنت امرأة ولازم ما تسوين شيء، هذا كان موجود لفترة. الحين أنا ما أقول تغير، ولكن مع تعليم الأمهات، مع وصول خريجات عدد كبير في دولة الإمارات، عندنا إحنا وصلوا للتعليم العالي وخلصوا الجامعات وما بعد الجامعات. الآن في موجود أمهات في مستوى تعليم عالي ممتاز. عشان كذا نقول في بداية الدولة قطعت شوط كبير في وضع البنات في التعليم، في القضاء على الفقر، وكلها هي مسببات للعنف. تمكين المرأة العاملة بوجود حضانات، فكرة اللي طرحتها الأخت ريم، لكن اللي تحتاج تطوير فيها أن يكون فيه بارتنرشيب مع القطاع الخاص والاستماع لأرباب العمل سواء كانوا حكومات أو شركات خاصة، وفي نفس الوقت للأمهات واحتياجاتهم. في مبادرة من سمو حاكم الشارقة ببناء 66 حضانة لتمكين المرأة العاملة في إمارة الشارقة. يحتاج أيضاً إلى وجود نوع آخر من الحضانات. كون الشارقة إمارة صديقة للطفل، أصبح في وجود غرف رضاعة في كل مؤسساتها. اللي نحتاجه مو بس غرف رضاعة، نحتاج إلى حضانة شوي أكبر بمعايير مختلفة لتمكين المرأة على الأقل من هالناحية، المرأة العاملة. أما عن العنف هو
we need to conclude shortly. Our time's up, but I would like to take a couple of more questions. Please keep it as brief as possible. The gentleman in the middle. Thank you. Any other questions? And
There's a lady there.
Yes, in the back, and then we can conclude.
Hi, it's a really interesting discussion.
Please identify yourself.
My name is Norman. I do consultancy. I do like startups and projects in the area of FMCG, basically businesses, right? You see, it's a combination of long-term and short-term solutions. I mean, yes, daycares and so on and so forth is one part of it. And for the long-term, what Dr. Danish was saying as well, that it's basically, changing the mindset. Yeah, and what one of the ladies was saying just now, that education is really important as well. For me, the really important thing is how you treat your kids at home, being a father and mother, right? It starts from there. Yeah? So how do a brother being taught how you treat the daughter, or two humans are not the same. How come you can't compare man and a female, right? I mean, me with my friend, two males are not the same, right? So this sort of thought has to be there. And I believe, being an optimistic, I believe it's going to happen, because now the education is more, this topic has been talked about more and more. So when we, or this generation, new generation, going to have kids, and I hope, and I
It has to start with the family. You
Yes.
have a great argument there. Any question for our panelists? No,
just
thank
wanted
you.
to.
Can we move to the last question, please? Thank you. So much, thank you. Please identify yourself. We cannot hear you. Is the mic on? And may I ask our technical team to also prepare the final slide for Dr. Mustafa?
It's on now. My
Hello.
name is Dima Ma'aita. I'm a founding partner at Sustainable Minds. I just want to say that I agree with Dr. Danish, because for all of these empowerment programs and partnerships and initiatives to work, we really need to change the social attitudes towards, gender-based discrimination is very much rooted in our society. And even, as you mentioned, you have women who are empowered and they're educated, but still we are facing a lot of difficulties when we enter this gentleman's club of entrepreneurs. So even me, as I'm a very lucky woman, I'm empowered, my parents empower me, got the best education and everything. But even now, as an entrepreneur, when I want to go to a meeting, I found this discrimination because I cannot network like a man does. I cannot take someone out for dinner just to make a business deal. So these are the things that needs to change. For women to be empowered, we really need to change those social norms and attitudes towards how a woman should act inside the house or outside the house or in the workplace or in anywhere we go. This is something that we face, me and my partners, we're all women. Can you imagine? 3 women against the world and we want our business to work, but this is something that we face every day, those social norms and attitudes towards women. We are not going to be empowered before that, and this is why I agree with Dr.
Thank you, and also for speaking up and for saying that. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I would like to ask you all to give a brief final message. So what is the takeaway from each of you for our audience to remember from your day today, from this panel session? Sarah, you go first, please.
There's a lot of takeaway. What I find often with these panels is that, we're sort of preaching a little bit to the choir, right? We all understand the issue and we all understand the problem and we all have different approaches to solutions. I think that the idea of redefining gender is incredibly important and is more and more work. The UN was a little slow to the party on that, but we are working on that more and more. It is incredibly important to have the difficult conversations about what goes on in our personal relationships with each other from an early age, with children, with men, and with boys. It doesn't take away from the feminist movement. It doesn't take away from the women's movement. It's creating a space for allies, for people to come together and move forward together. And it's not a women's issue. It's not a men's issue. It's an issue for all of us. And I think that is incredibly important.
بالنسبة لي كلمة أخيرة تكون بالعمل الجماعي مؤسسات المجتمع الخاص والحكومي والمنظمات الأهلية. النصيحة هي استشارة النساء، الاستماع إليهن جيداً هو المفتاح لفهم أدوارهن وحاجاتهن وتصميم خدمات ملائمة وترك الخيار لهن دون إملاء. هذه رسالتي لهم.
Thank you. Mavik.
As a women's rights activist that has focused work on policy advocacy, we've always lobbied the UN and member states, come up with good policies and effectively implement them, dedicate financial resources to them, holding them accountable all the time. But what we've realized in the work on violence against women is that not everything can be put into policies or legislation. Sociocultural responses are just as equally important as mentioned by two of our colleagues. So social institutions like the church, the educational institutions, and the media play a critical role in the socio-cultural responses, as well as in holding governments and the UN accountable by raising awareness of laws and policies. But I also want to emphasize on holding families and communities accountable, because they are the first ones to disown women when women are violated, especially when women and girls are sexually violated. They disown them, they ask them to leave the home because they're bringing dishonor to the family.
This
and that's
is
why
about,
it creates
again, changing
impunity.
the culture, the social culture.
Exactly.
Thank you. Dr. Mustafa,
Get the last slide.
can we have the final slide, please? Any chance we can have a look at the final slide, because this is important?
You can go ahead in the meantime while you put up the slide, and then
Okay.
I'll come back. Just not to waste time.
Okay, Reem?
So you go right.
Okay.
I did it.
Ah.
Oh, it's up.
It's up, great, thank you.
There are 3 universities, King's College London, Arizona State, and University of New South Wales in Australia. There are about 30 academics working on it. We can promise you, as a result of that, the Sustainable Development Goals, unless you address 2, gender equality and responsible production and consumption. Without these 2, nothing's going to happen. If you think I'm just only talking about identity and culture and all of that, yes, because these are politically driven issues. Responsible production and consumption and gender are politically driven issues. If you make that political decision, everything else would follow. You don't do it, nothing will happen. That's the takeaway.
But there has to be the political will, as Mavic very accurately said before. Reem, concluding with you, please, a very brief message for our audience to remember.
What we found quite useful is basically collective action, a collective voice. To have a collective action is very, very important. And also the personal stories makes the government or officials puts the matter as an urgent matter, and they need to take action. We had many stories on that. We had a campaign on social media with the Twitter, and we were able to get the attention of the government of Jordan to the campaign related to the bank transfer. And the Minister of Education himself promised the teachers that early 2018, he will make a decision that all private schools in Jordan will start transferring the salaries by bank transfer. So these are...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for this great conversation, very insightful conversation, and your engagement as our audience today. I would like to conclude with a poem. Let us show her the kindness of strangers, as strangers so often turn out to be friends. Then, as friends, we can guide her to freedom and rejoice in the person she becomes when the pain finally ends. Thank you very much for your participation today.